Okay, picture this. We're dropping right into a busy clinic, looking at a scenario that literally plays out thousands of times a day. Imagine an anxious, well-meaning new counselor sitting across from a client. You know the feeling, right? You can practically feel the pressure radiating off this counselor. They really want to help. They want to fix the problem. And sitting across from them, well, that's a client teetering right on the edge of making a change. Let's see how this plays out. So the client offers this really vulnerable, hesitant opening. They say, I've been thinking maybe I should cut back. Guys, this is a massive moment. It's a clear signal, what we call change talk, showing that the client is actually considering a new path. They're cracking the door open, inviting the counselor in. But let's look at what actually happens next. Instead of just sitting with that vulnerability, the nervous counselor fires off 3 questions in a row. When did you start? How much you're using daily? Do you want to go to detox? Boom, boom, boom. Instantly, you can just see that door slam shut. The client leans back, crosses their arms, and just like that, the session has officially turned into an interview. The client's motivation retreats and defensiveness takes its place. Let's pause the tape right here. We need to ask ourselves a core question. Why do new counselors ask too many questions, and what should they do instead? Because, look, this over-questioning, it's not born from malice, not at all. It's a super common mistake born from a new counselor's natural anxiety. When we feel out of our depth, our instinct is to just grab for data. We think, if I just get enough facts, I'll find the magical solution to fix their life. But in doing so, we completely miss the human sitting right in front of us. Right, so let's dive into this. It's known as the question and answer trap. It's basically a defense mechanism where counselors use a barrage of questions just to avoid the discomfort of sitting with heavy emotions. When your focus is entirely on gathering information, the room starts to feel a lot like an interrogation. It establishes you, the counselor, as the expert, holding all the answers, and it forces the client into being a totally passive recipient. They just sit there giving you short little data points, completely disconnected from their own internal motivation to actually change. Let's map this out on the whiteboard and contrast that interrogation path we just witnessed with a totally different approach, the reflection path. Firing off multiple questions, that just causes the client to give those short, defensive answers. But offering a reflection, that encourages the client to explore their own ambivalence. Let's rewind the tape and run that exact same scenario again, but this time, the counselor takes a completely different route. The client says, I've been thinking maybe I should cut back. But this time, the counselor stops. They take a deep breath, and instead of asking a probing question, they offer this simple rephrasing of what the client just said. You're wondering if your use is starting to get in your way. Notice the tone there? There's no upward inflection at the end. It's not a question, it's a statement. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of just stopping. Look at the client's response now. Without being prompted by a single question, they naturally go deeper. Yeah, sometimes I wake up feeling awful and I can't think straight most of the morning. See that? The client is now advocating for their own change. They're exploring their own reality, simply because the counselor held up a mirror instead of shining an interrogation spotlight right in their face. Scenario 2, the defensive client. Now, what's really interesting is how this plays out when a client is a bit more resistant. Not everyone comes in gently pondering a change, right? Sometimes their guard is completely up. So we're back in the clinic, and the client gives us this classic, double-sided statement of ambivalence. I know this isn't good for me, but I can't imagine life without it. They are completely torn. One foot is stepping toward recovery, and the other is firmly planted in their current habits. This is the exact moment where an inexperienced counselor usually hits the panic button. If we react the wrong way, we fall right back into that question and answer trap, trying to logically persuade them. We ask things like, well, don't you care about your health? And that instantly puts them on the defensive. They will literally start arguing for their substance use just to answer your question. But the right reaction, that's using a complex, double-sided reflection that keeps the alliance totally intact. So instead of arguing, the counselor says, giving it up would be hard, and you recognize that it's time to stop. Look really closely at the language here. By using the word "and" to join their desire to keep using with their desire to change, you reflect the absolute reality of their struggle. You don't use the word "but," which kind of just erases the first part of the sentence. You use "and." That proves you're listening, you aren't judging, and you definitely aren't forcing an interrogation. So the absolutely crucial point here is that reflective listening isn't just staying quiet. It's a highly active process. It means making a mental hypothesis about the underlying meaning or feeling of a client's statement and reflecting your best guess back to them. You're not just repeating their words like a parrot. You're reading between the lines. It's noticing that, hey, when they talk about their anger, there's actually a deep well of fear underneath it, and then you gently reflect that fear back. Reflections really do the heavy lifting in these conversations because they naturally draw out the client's own motivations. They build a profoundly safe environment and completely avoid that expert trap where you feel like you need to have all the answers. And most importantly, they selectively reinforce change talk. When you reflect back the healthy, positive parts of what a client says, it amplifies that part of their brain. You're putting them in charge of their own self-exploration, completely bypassing the defensiveness that rapid-fire questions create. Let's look at how this builds a measurable habit. We don't want to get rid of questions entirely, right? Sometimes you need them to start the engine. But the golden ratio for a strong clinical alliance is asking one open question followed by 2 or 3 reflective responses, a 1-to-2 ratio. If you find yourself asking question after question after question, you are off the path. You need to pull back, offer a reflection, and hand the client back the steering wheel. Tomorrow's next step. Okay, theory is great, but application is everything. How do you actually stop yourself from falling into the question and answer trap when the pressure is on? Tomorrow, when that familiar anxiety hits in the clinic and you feel the overwhelming urge to fill the silence with an interrogation, just stop. 1, take a deep breath, let the silence hang for a second. 2, observe the client's underlying feeling. What are they really trying to say? And 3, make a guess. Form a reflection instead of a question. Let your statement drop at the end rather than rising into a question mark. I want to leave you with this final thought to challenge your default habits. In your next session, are you interviewing your client or are you truly listening to them? Because an interview gets you facts, but a reflection gets you transformation. When you finally stop interrogating, you'll be amazed at how quickly your clients will start answering the exact questions you never even had to ask.